One of the big mistakes I made this year was not talking enough about Fire Emblem Engage. I suppose I was hard at work at my on Jaw the Dragon at the time. I was like, I think I had to push back my release date by a couple of months, and I was like, really anxious to get this thing out as soon as possible. So even although I played Fire Emblem Engage and enjoyed it, I was not up to speed on what the narrative was when it came to this game, and I really deeply apologize for that because I think Fire Emblem Engage is the closest we've gotten to pretendo rhetoric becoming mainstream since like in a long, long time. Like I'm thinking back to like Tokyo Mirage sessions, right, where people will try to convince you the game bombed because of censorship, when in reality it was a niche title on the Wii U and never really found its audience, right? That there was a lot of weird aspects to Fire Emblem Engage coming out, right? Like, I myself was kind of put off by the game and its visuals and stuff like that, but upon actually playing it, I began to see its positive attributes, right? I really like the gameplay. I really like the improved pacing. I really like the character models and the animations, which I think are a series high point. There are, I kind of like the black and white morality in this one. I think Three Houses in a lot of ways. Like I like morally gray situations, but it was nice to see like the developers try and make like a more like outright black and white situation, something that's a bit more like wholesome and a bit like targeted towards younger audiences. Like there was nothing inherently wrong with anything they did with the game itself, right? Like the more I play it, like the more I realize that like yeah, this is a stellar entry, a great homage to the history of Fire Emblem, and it's something that I think people really would have enjoyed if they gave it a chance. And that's kind of the situation I'm noticing with Fire Emblem Engage is that like much like Tokyo Mirage Sessions, the people who are still talking about Engage, who are still discussing it, who are like trying to push a narrative about it are people who never even played it to begin with, right? These people are like, talking about censorship. They're talking about like the story. They're talking about like things that don't really affect the core gameplay. Like they'll never talk about the gameplay itself, is what I've noticed, right? They'll never talk about like the things the game does well. They'll never talk about like its positive attributes, which there are plenty, right? Even if it's not the best FE game ever made, but they'll exemplify the negative aspects so thoroughly, like so extensively that like it feels like there's no positive qualities to the game at all, right? And I think to a lot of laymen, people who don't like talk about this stuff a lot or maybe haven't played the game or who don't really care, like I think it would be really easy for people to assume that this game wasn't well received or that it's not very good. But in reality, like this game does have an audience, it does have a following, it does have a fan base, I was I've been talking about like how much I like Ivy and Penna and like a lot of those characters. I look back fondly on my time with Engage, right? It's not my new FE game by any, favorite FE game by any means, but to say that like it's a step below like other strategy RPGs that came out around the same time, like Triangle Strategy, for example, I think Engage is definitely better than Triangle Strategy. I loved Triangle Strategy, right? Like I thought it was great. I thought it was a great homage to like the PS1 era of like Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics. Like, but like there's no denying that like a lot of the story decisions they made with Triangle Strategy did not make sense. It did have a really weird opening segment. Like it did have like weird pacing. It did have like these weird like this weird cutscene where like characters make it out like they're gonna help you, but then they never actually show up. Like it's like they didn't finish the game properly in some regards, right? I've had problems with like I wanted to do something very, very specific, but like my party members, specifically like my fiance Frederica, kept voting against me, and like it led into like bad situations that I didn't want to get into that I foresaw coming, right? Like like I like Triangle Strategy. Like there's definitely a lot of things to praise about the game, but in the end, I think Engage was better because at its core, it is simply a better strategy game, right? And I know going into this, like the narrative right now is that like, oh man, Unicorn Overlord, that's going to be better than Engage for sure. But like the thing is, like Unicorn Overlord is coming out like a full year after Engage. Like if you've played, I bought and played Fire Emblem Engage before I even knew that Unicorn Overlord existed. Yeah, yeah, sure. If they were coming out like the same weekend or something, like I'd probably say that, like, yeah, Unicorn Overlord, it's coming from Vanillaware. I just played like Grim Gamora and 13 Sentinels, which is like two of my no amazing experiences, especially 13 Sentinels. Like I love those games. Like maybe in that specific situation, I would have said like, yeah, Unicorn Overlord looks better than Engage, right? But like if the games are launching a year apart, like just buy and play both. Like which one is better doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when like they're launching that far apart. That would be like if I compared like Metroid Dread to Samus Returns, right? I like both. I think both are great games. Do they really need to be compared that much? Like do we need to go through like a fine-tooth comb and see which one does things better and like which one innovated more and like how Samus Returns handled the story and like affected continuity and like the changes it made. Like, can't we just like say both games are amazing for what they are and just kind of leave it at that? Why do we need to give like a hard score to it? Like, who cares? Like, if they're both good games, why not just play both, right? And that's kind of my thing is that like I'm seeing so many people like continue to rage about Fire Emblem Engage, trying to say it's like one of the big disappointments of the year, when in reality I thought it was way better than I thought it was going to be. I was very 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 pleasantly surprised by it, right? Like I thought that game was stellar. Like I legit thought it might be a game of the year contender when I first played it. And of course, like I think over time, I've played other games this year that I've really liked. I'm gonna have to reevaluate that decision, but like, there's no denying that I really, really loved Engage, and I am so tired of people like trashing on it, and then going like, "This is why I didn't buy the game or why I didn't finish it." Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like the game has a lot of positive qualities to it, and I never see these people try to give any attention to that whatsoever, right? Like Persona, like again, like this seems to be a trend with like FE right now, or more specifically, like any Nintendo franchise that has like some kind of following online, right? Xenoblade fans are going after Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for not being exactly like the first two games, right? You have Fire Emblem fans doing this. Animal Crossing fans are constantly ragging on Nintendo for the update schedule or whatever. Nintendo Switch Online people are attacking like every update the service gets. You have like Mario, right? The weird rivalry between 2D and 3D Mario, right? Like you have so many people right now trying to argue that like Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not a major release for Nintendo, and that they would have been better off just making like a sequel to Odyssey. Like never mind that like 2D Mario is like really really great and a lot of people like it. Like oh, it's not a major release. Like you have situations like that. You have like Zelda and like the people trying to pretend as if they were huge fans of like the 3D Ocarina of Time era, right? Like you have people like that. Metroid. You have that weird thing. Uh, you know, all the people like so who are pretending to be hyped for Prime 4 mysteriously didn't show up for Dread. The best-selling Metroid game ever. Like it's you see this a lot, right? You see this a lot in the Nintendo sphere, right? And I do think the backlash towards Engaged is in no way indicative of the game's overall quality or success, right? Like I think in a lot of ways, Three Houses was a runaway success for the franchise. It kind of surpassed expectations. Nobody, not even the creators, were expecting it to do as well as it did. And I think Engage is kind of like fallen back to where the franchise was before, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You are naive if you build your business around this idea that like each product is going to do better than the last, right? Engage has still done bangers, right? Like it's still sold quite a bit. Like people still enjoy it. So like, why exactly are we like ragging on it for not selling as well as like Three Houses, the best-selling title in the series so far? Like I love Three Houses, right? Like, and I can see why it became so popular with specific groups of people. But like, Engage being so different, like I think it should be celebrated, not condemned, you know? Like I have so many positive things to say about the game at any given time. Like it's so strange to see people so religiously try and attack this release.